Hey folks, welcome to week 2. This is the week in which you have hopefully read the U.S. Constitution and have thought about it and have some thoughts on it. In the past, I've done this week or these classes as a PowerPoint, and I'm going to go through the PowerPoint slides that I have real quick. This is just sort of a greatest hits of the Constitution. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, but this is what I think is important. The preamble you all know, it's fairly famous. We the people, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, and ensure domestic tranquility. Nothing too crazy there. Article 1. Some people are always surprised that the first article of the Constitution does not create the office of the presidency or the executive. When we talk about the three branches of our government, we talk about the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch, or the judiciary. Article 1 creates the legislative branch. That's the first thing created by the Constitution. And as you'll see, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress. The Congress has two parts, two halves, the Senate and the House. In the Senate, there are 100 senators, one from every U.S. state. In the House, the representatives are apportioned to the state depending on the size of the state and the population of the state. So you can have a lot of reps from a big state like Texas or New York or California, and fewer reps from a smaller state, at least population-wise, like South Dakota. What's really interesting to think about is, if you think about the Senate, there are 44 million Californians. There are, I think, about 500,000 South Dakotans. But the South Dakotans have the exact same representation in Congress as 44 million Californians. And so if you do the math, you think about it and think about that South Dakotans have maybe a disproportionate amount of leverage or amount of power in the U.S. Congress. Now, there are pros and cons to why that is, one of which is that you wouldn't want all these Californians just to be making rules for the folks who live in South Dakota. Or be controlling the land in South Dakota. But it is interesting to think about the idea that that low population states have the exact same number of senators in Congress as high population states. Small states like Massachusetts have the exact same number of senators as large states like Alaska. In some ways, it's a kind of a built-in, I wouldn't call it a flaw, but there certainly are people who will argue that it seems crazy that 44 million Californians get the exact same number of votes in the Senate as 500,000 South Dakotans. Worth thinking about. Jumping ahead a little bit, this is all still part of Article 1. Different sections. One of the sections in Article 1, Section 8 allows the Congress to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the states. That's called the Commerce Clause. A lot of times the things in the Constitution get reduced to phrases, and people act like they know what these phrases mean, but the Commerce Clause, that's where it comes from. When they say the Commerce Clause, they mean Section 8 of Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution, the clause that covers commerce. If you move on, basically this is the language that basically says that Congress decides if we go to war or not the president. Congress is supposed to have the power of the purse and is supposed to be able to say whether or not the U.S. goes to war. Article 2 is what creates the executive. The executive being the office of the presidency and the president. It's interesting. One of these bullet points talks about how the president shall take the following oath or affirmation. I do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of the President of the United States and will to the best of my ability preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution. You know, we all those oaths are taken seriously in Congress, in government. If you move on, this language in red talks about the presidency, the executive, the president, having the power, with the advice and consent of the Senate, to appoint judges of the Supreme Court. That language has gotten a great deal of attention in the past few years because there have been times where the executive has tried to appoint a justice and the Senate has refused to give advice and consent. And in fact, there was one famous case with Merrick Garland when Justice Scalia died and President Obama nominated Merrick Garland, and the Senate at the time was being led by Mitch McConnell, a senator from Kentucky, refused to even have a vote on the nomination of Merrick Garland to take the seat occupied by Justice Scalia. And there was a great deal of discussion about what this language meant. Does the Senate have to consent? Does the Senate have to provide advice? Or is it up to the Senate to decide whether or not to even hold hearings? Article 3 creates the judiciary. It creates the Supreme Court and all the courts that flow beneath it. You may or may not know that there's nothing in Article 3 that says you have to have 9 Supreme Court justices. Question whether or not 9 is the right number. It has been for a very long time, and of course, any effort to change that number would be extraordinary. How do you amend the Constitution? It's not easy. Article 5 provides the mechanism for that. Jumping ahead here a little bit because I don't want to take too long. This is the Article 6 says that no senator shall have to take a religious test to qualify for office. They have to be bound by an oath or affirmation, but there's no religious test. You can be Catholic, Jewish, Muslim, agnostic, atheist, doesn't matter. Now, there are a lot more articles, but then you get to the amendments. And of course, the one we all know is the First Amendment. And one thing to think about for the First Amendment is that it doesn't protect you from any repercussions for things you say or do. It only protects you from the state, that is the government, punishing you for things you say. So for example, if you want to wear a shirt that says, let's go Brandon, which is the popular saying in some quarters these days, the government can't arrest you for that. You can't be put in jail for expressing a political opinion about President Biden, about President Trump, about President Obama. However, if you were to wear a shirt that said Chipotle is terrible to your job at Chipotle, Chipotle could fire you because they have no obligation to honor your First Amendment rights. You have your First Amendment rights, but they don't protect you from private enterprise or from getting sued by a person or from getting fired and losing your job. So the First Amendment only protects you from state action. It's not it's not a get out of jail free card to express yourself any way you want to and expect that nobody can do anything to you about it. This is a big one, obviously. So the Second Amendment, which has been interpreted to provide various rights to bear arms. This is what it actually says. A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, obviously, there has been a lot of trees have died to make the paper for the arguments about what this amendment means and what rights it conveys. We'll get to this a bit later in the course, but as you can see, it's not the clearest language in the world, and it's not exactly clear what it means. What does well-regulated mean? What is a militia? What is the security of a free state? What does a state in this in the amendment mean? What do arms mean? Keep and bear arms. You will not believe the detail that people go into to determine what these words meant when they were written and what they mean now. The Fourth Amendment obviously provides against provides protection from unreasonable searches and seizures. Jumping ahead again, you can kind of just go through this due process. You get to have a lawyer. Amendment 6 gives you the right to a lawyer and a speedy trial. Amendment 8 provides that you cannot be subject to cruel and unusual punishment. Again, a lot of debate has gone into what the terms cruel and unusual punishment means. Is wearing a sandwich board and being forced to stand on a sidewalk confessing your crimes, is that cruel and unusual? What about being placed in a stress position? What about being placed in solitary confinement? What about requiring prison? This is a big one. What about requiring somebody on death row to choose the means by which they are executed? There are lots and lots of issues that come up about what these things mean, and where do those issues get resolved? In the courts. Amendment 10 is what basically says that if the Constitution or if the U.S. government has not made a law about something, then those rights are reserved to the states. This means that if the federal government, through the Constitution, has not made a law about something, or if the laws that the U.S. government has made are deemed unconstitutional, then the issues go back to the states. Where might this come up? Well, there are some big cases on reproductive rights right now before the Supreme Court. One case before the Supreme Court asks whether or not there is a constitutional right for a woman to choose to terminate a pregnancy. If the Supreme Court were to say that there is no constitutional right to do that, then it's possible that states would get to decide for that particular state what the laws are that govern freedom of choice and the reproductive rights of women in those states. That's where this Amendment 10 would come in. You don't get to Amendment 13 until 1865, when slavery is finally outlawed. After that is when the Civil Rights Movement started, and the Voting Rights Act was one of the products of that. Tax is kind of boring. Moving on again quickly, it's not until you get to 1920 that women get the right to vote. This is called the franchise. Poll taxes are when they make you pay to vote, or they make you they pay a tax in order to vote. The reason that they don't allow that is because obviously that would mean that only people who could afford a poll tax got to vote. So I'm going to jump ahead again. In 1970, the Constitution was amended to lower the voting age to 18. Why do you think that was? Well, in part because a whole lot of kids, 18 to 20 years old, probably many of you are that age, were going over to Vietnam to fight and die on behalf of the country. And it didn't seem fair or correct that those folks could be sent overseas to fight for the country, but weren't allowed to vote for the policies that might send them to war. And so the Constitution was amended in 1970 to give people who are 18 the right to vote, which is why many of you can vote now. Anyway, that's it for this screencast-o-matic. Please do read the Constitution. Think about it. It's the foundational document. It's the blueprint and the framework for the system under which all the other laws and rights and rules of our country flow. Thanks.